Hello, students. This is Mr. Martyrin with your flip classroom on the Conquest of the Americas. Before we get started with the notes, I want you guys to take a look at the map that's on the screen in front of us. This is a map of North America as we know it in the 1600s, and how it was divided up by the three major European powers at the time, Britain, France, and Spain. So as you guys can see, on the east coast of what is now the United States, it was predominantly occupied by Great Britain. They settled, they had colonies in Jamestown, they had colonies in Plymouth, Roanoke, all up and down the eastern seaboard. Okay, these would eventually become the 13 colonies. Farther inland, what's now the Ohio River Valley, all the way through the midpoint of the United States, it's kind of the Mississippi River, that area was occupied by France. Now, eventually, the British, after the French and Indian War, would take control of Canada, parts of the United States, and then France, their area would be pushed back even farther out to the middle part of the United States. But that part currently in the 1600s belongs to Spain. Spain controlled about 2/3 of our map, the American Southwest, and Florida. Everything up here, what's now British Columbia and Alaska, all of that was unexplored. And they still didn't have accurate maps of what North America looked like at the time. So there was this elusive Northwest Passage that all the explorers were hoping to find. And they were looking for an all-water route from Europe to Asia. And as we know, one doesn't exist. But Hudson is going to spend a lot of time heading north up through the Hudson Bay. Columbus obviously tried it with no success. Several explorers will try it, and they're unable to do so. But this is what North America looks like, and we're going to spend this video talking about the motives for European conquest of the Americas. So in your notes, you want to take a look at the page that has this graphic organizer set up. And we're going to go over this right now. So, what were the goals of the Spanish, the British, and the French? Well, religion. The Spanish wanted to convert the Native Americans to Christianity. They wanted to gain land for the Native Americans, and they wanted gold. I mean, that was a pretty big motivating factor. And remember, exploration's happening at a time when the Catholic Church is losing members and followers. So they're looking for converts. They're looking for ways to spread their religion. Now, the British, they were interested in commercial ventures, meaning they were looking to move out and secure colonies that would provide wealth to the mother country. And additionally, groups like the Pilgrims or the Puritans that we talked about in the last chapter, they sought asylum in the New World. And finally, the French. The French were out on the frontier. They were fishing, fur trapping, and their goal was to also win some converts to Christianity, but also they wanted to take a look, or they wanted to take advantage of the tremendous amount of resources that North America had to offer. As far as the government, the Spanish king exercised strict control over the colonies, and a Council of the Indies was set up, and they employed the use of something called viceroys. And a viceroy, you want to highlight or underline that word that's going to be on your test. A viceroy is nothing more than the Spanish representative of the king in the New World. Now, Great Britain, as we know, the colonists were overseen by royal governors who were appointed by the king. And for the most part, Great Britain is not too interested in the colonies. They saw them as ways to make money, but they really didn't care what the colonists were doing at the beginning of colonization. As we see, that's going to be a huge problem because Great Britain gives the colonies a tremendous amount of freedom, but then that more or less backfires on them by the mid-1700s. And France. France at first pays very little attention to overseas exploration, but the minute they see Great Britain beginning to develop material wealth and possessions, they get very involved. And the king offers some control over the northern colonies. As far as religion goes, Well, the Catholic Church was very influential in controlling the government, and the Catholic Church also encouraged the use of missionaries. And these missionaries were sent over, again, with this express purpose to convert people to Christianity. This is how Catholicism really made it to the Americas during this age of exploration. Great Britain, their colonies were seen as a safe haven from religious persecution. Remember, during this time period in England, Catholics and Protestants are at war with each other. One another are persecuting each other. So many people come to the New World to seek religious freedom. And France, similarly to Spain, missionaries are heading overseas with the goal of spreading religion. However, interestingly enough, the King of France forbade Protestants to settle to the New World. So originally, the New World was settled predominantly by Spanish Catholics. All right. The big question that we're going to be talking about later in the unit is this question of slavery. Each country handles slavery different. At first, the first country actually to use slaves was the Spanish, the Portuguese. They enslaved Native Americans living in Brazil. Unfortunately, because of the Native Americans were not immune to European germs and diseases, they died in numbers by the thousands, what would almost be considered genocidal. But nevertheless, they needed a labor supply, and that's where the use of using African Americans as cargo comes into play. Great Britain uses African slaves. Once it becomes common practice, Great Britain has no problems sending ships over to Africa to round up African slaves for a number of reasons. Most commonly that the British thought that they were racially superior, more civilized, so they would round up Africans, break families apart, put them on cargo ships in tight containers and tight packaging, and ship them across the Middle Passage to the New World, where they would work on as slaves on southern plantations. And the French also used slaves, and for the most part, African slaves were in the Caribbean colonies. So all three, Spain, Great Britain, and France, did use slaves. They never brought slaves back to Europe. That's kind of a common misconception that a lot of students have. They think that slaves were brought back to Europe, whether it be in England or France or Spain, but slaves never made it to Europe. Slaves were picked up by these countries and sent to the New World. And now, how do we look at their interactions with the Native Americans? Well, very simply, the Spanish conquered and destroyed the Native American civilization. As one of man's inhumanities to man, the Spanish had a tremendous advantage, whether it was guns, germs, or steel, but they were able to overpower and outmuscle the Native Americans. And as a result, the Incan and Aztec civilizations were wiped off, destroyed. Originally, there was some cooperation between the British and the Native Americans, but once the British became more comfortable and more familiar with the land, the British had no problem moving or relocating the Native Americans. Probably the one country that had probably the best relationship with the Native Americans was the French. And the Native Americans and the French worked. They had I don't want to say a partnership, but there was more cooperation between the French and the Native Americans. Additionally, Native Americans, or the French, were allowed to marry Native American women, which plays a very interesting role in American history, because some of the best ways to decipher Native American language is through French and through some of the French journals and sources that we have. So that proved to be a pretty valuable asset when dealing with the age of exploration. Like always, if I went too fast and you need to view this slide again, please feel free to do so. If you have any questions, you can post them on our discussion board. But in the meantime, get ready for your next flip video.